You are listening to the Critical Mass Radio Show, Orange County's business talk show, focused on exploring topics of interest to CEOs who are leading middle market companies. With your host, Richard Franzi.
Hello and welcome to Orange County's longest running business talk show. I am your host, Rick Franzi, and I think we're going to have a good show for you today because we have a great guest, Raad Ghantous, who I've known for quite some time. Hi, Raad. He is the principal of Raad Ghantous and Associates, and we're going to talk about his business and inspiration and what he's doing now. So let's get started. You've been in business for 19 years. Let's go back a ways. What was the original motivation you had to start your own business, Raad?
I think interior design was a change of direction for me. I have an undergrad in economics and a master's in marketing from Drucker, and ended up going into interior design. My dad is a civil engineer, so I grew up on job sites. It wasn't necessarily the intended path, so I am a firm believer of happy accidents and kind of being open to life, basically guiding you. So interior design came up as something to do when the real estate market back in '91 crashed, and I was working with a developer, and I'm like, well, what am I going to do with myself? And ended up doing a interior design institute in Newport Beach, doing a degree, a certification, like a summer certificate program. And I thought, hey, 12 weeks of arts and crafts. That sounds like a good way of spending some time. And then I was actually, for the very first time in all my academic career or path, I was raising the bar on myself, Rick. It was an interesting reality. You weren't competing with other people in this spot. I was competing with myself. Every semester, I want to kind of take it to the next level. So the appeal to me kind of was two-sided of my brain. It was a creative outlet, but also a solution provision. Like it was a creative solution, working out a puzzle. And that's always appealed to me from way back, whether it's trying to figure out how to, how an item would look like in 3D, just in your mind. So it kind of appealed to a lot of my stuff. And the motivation to go into interior design was that. It was feeding a part of me that was a nice mix of both sides of my brain. But I also knew that I wanted to do something that was variety based. And so I focused on hospitality design, because if you're doing a hotel, you're doing a bar one day, you're doing a presidential suite another day, you're doing a restaurant of whatever kind the third day. They all kind of fall underneath that same umbrella of hospitality, of the same property in some cases. And so I liked the variety of that, and I liked the challenge that it was also very budget and time based. And so you had to basically deal with it from almost like as a business. So that was the motivation back then. And I went and did an internship with a firm that was like number 16 in the world at the time for interior design out of LA. Ended up working for a couple of large firms, just kind of like shameless name dropping here, Hirsch Bedner in Atlanta. Although they have an office in LA, I couldn't get into LA or Chicago or New York, any of those primary markets. So I went to Atlanta, which at the time, '98, was starting to become a primary market right after the Olympics. And then I came back here because my folks were here, and my sister and her family. I came back, got an opportunity to go work for a company by the name of WAT&G, which if you look at the spectrum, there's a ziggurat building right now, and it has big red letters on it, say WAT&G, Wilson, Wimberly, Allison, Tong Go. And they were, and I still are, a very prominent architectural firm for hospitality projects, for hotel projects. If you name about 10 projects, probably some of them worldwide they're responsible for in some degree or the other. So it's been a very rich corporate background. And then when I went out on my own, I still wanted to have that appeal. But what I realized is, and I wanted my own, I didn't want to basically be some corporate structure. There was a little frustration, to be honest. And I think anybody who's been in that corporate space can tell you, there's a little frustration when you're sort of entrepreneurial in spirit, that you feel like you don't have that room to basically go there. And no disrespect to the companies. Companies were wonderful, and I learned a lot on those paths, but it was time. So when I went out, I realized that the level of sophisticated services in consultancy that we offered, the likes of Hyatt's, Ritz-Carlton's, Four Seasons, what have you, that was even almost super critical for mom and pops and brick and mortar. they needed that level of sophisticated business consultancy in order to basically make sure that the second mortgage they took on their house to expand their business isn't in jeopardy. Because if their business failed, it wasn't, oh, well, we'll just write it off and we'll just do something else next year as a corporation. It really impacted them hard. So I like to say to people that from the very beginning until now, it's always been creative solution provision for me. And we like to basically look at our business as a business consultancy that just happens to manifest itself in a three-dimensional physical environment. We design and build stages for which people can perform their business on successfully, whether you're a bar, whether you're a retail location. And that has become more and more critical as we have had shifts in consumer behavior and purchasing patterns. The last couple of years is a huge indicator with COVID. How do you compete in that space? How do you develop and evolve your business matrix to where you continue to be not only competitive but thrive? It's a tough spot right now for a lot of people, and a lot of businesses didn't make it through COVID. So that's kind of how I got involved and got started, and I think it's still very much part of what drives me.
So let's look back. 19 years, that's impressive. You've reinvented yourself. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, but I'm wondering, how long after you hung your shingle, created your company, did you truly believe this business that you now lead was going to survive and thrive?
Well, you've interviewed enough, entrepreneurs and sole proprietors to know that pretty much every day you wake up and you go, am I going to make it to the end of the day today or not? I think that, to be honest, I think we're kind of an interesting breed that way. I think that's part of what drives us is there's always a chance that you could misstep and you get more sophisticated and seasoned as you go ahead. I think what gave me confidence that this was a successful thing, again, like I said, it was never an aesthetic, pretty picture for me. It was always sort of, it had to have a direct impact on the positive impact on the bottom line. The answer is money. What was the question? It had to have a genuine, return on investment, ROI. It had to have a unique value proposition. And if you were, the talent really lay in how to layer that offering for the client so that they don't call you. When you walk away and you're done, they have a stage that basically will sustain them for 7 to 10 years, that their business isn't going to require a lot of more capital reinvestment into the space. They have something that will help them generate not only money, but to also support the philosophy in which they are conducting their business, regardless what the business is. So I knew that those truths are universally always going to be of value. The question was, how do you convey to a person that is, it's easy to do for a corporation because the corporation has a little bit more mind breadth and space to say, we're looking at the big picture. This is a long-term thing. For the mom and pop, for the people that are basically really in it, working every day on ungodly hours, how do you convince them that these building blocks are important and that they need to be proactive in how they put this together? They'll do it for, their balance sheets. They'll do it for their accounting, for their taxes. But how do you convince them that the physical environment that they are in can be as strong an asset to them in terms of sustaining their business as making sure that they have savings in the bank? And so I knew that there was value there. I also knew that it wasn't going to be an easy task to get there, to get people to trust you enough to let you guide them in this way, and that it was a long-term investment. And I tend to be very much, a long-term investor in people, in relationships. It's never been transactional for me. It's always been relational for me. And I think that's served me well. So I kind of had a confidence from the beginning, to be honest, Rick. Of course, there's been bumps along the way and pitfalls and knees bumped against things. But I think at the end, I still wake up probably about, I won't say 7 days out of the week, but let's say 6 days out of the week, and kind of look forward to doing this and what I can bring the benefit of people and be of service for.
So I want to ask you, you mentioned earlier COVID and you're focused on the retail space and your clientele. What have you seen over the past 2 years? What's been the impact of COVID on your clients as they look to reinvest or build out their physical space?
Right. Well, I mean, I keep trying to remind people just to kind of lessen the seeming just unbearable impact of COVID. That COVID really didn't start anything when it comes to that kind of stuff. It just accelerated it. We were already, if you were in a retail space, you were already facing challenges relevant to online sales. You were facing challenges because your primary customer base may have been baby boomers. They were aging. Their behavior patterns were changing in terms of what they were spending money on. You had an incoming millennial group. And it's just different. And if any business that's been around a certain duration of time has to constantly be in a reinvent and pivot and adjust. I mean, that's just the nature of business, right? And I think to add to the difficulties that many people faced is we went through about a decade of non-disruption, economic growth. Everything was hunky-dory. All signs pointed to more and more. And we forgot that, you have to have a little bit of built-in agility to your business. So whether you're a retail store, whether you're a hotel, whether you're a bar, I mean, God, look at the restaurant, food and beverage business over COVID, right? Who knew before COVID that they were going to be making so much money or even be allowed to make so much money with cocktail sales that are being delivered? Right, that genie is never going back into the bottle. Right, no way with the profit margins on alcohol. Forget that. So, hotels. How many people? You and I live in Orange County. How many hotels opened up along the freeway just before COVID or just as COVID happened? Right, and they all got mothballed because these are brand new properties, but they got mothballed because travel stopped. Business travel is never going to go back to the way it was before because now we have hybrid work situation, or what it's already has an acronym. It's WFH, which almost sounds like a rude profanity. WHFH, right? It's work from home, right? I was surprised. I just did a presentation for a group called Powerhouse Smart in Chicago last week, and we focused on reimagining the home because if you stood up, and I'll just use a reference point for people, if you stood up at like a parking structure on Lido, like in Lido Marina, and you looked across the Newport Beach Harbor, you would see neighborhoods that are residential. You would see neighborhoods that are, areas where there's office buildings, and you see areas where there's food and beverage. Well, before COVID, we used to go to work in the office building, and then pit stop at home on our way to go to the restaurant for entertainment. And then we basically would go back home, maybe, and sleep. And it was literally a pit stop. And then we went from having the home be a pit stop to where it's now a hybrid space. But the environment in the home, especially in even luxury market, the homes were there was a push for being open floor plan, open floor plan, open floor plan. Well, how does that work when you have to have hybrid spaces within your home to be able to do what we're doing right here for a Zoom? So now we've got terms like Zoom zones and Zen dens, which are basically fitness and wellness and a little meditation, and maybe it's an insulated room where I can go scream because my kids are driving me nuts, right? Or my wife or husband or whatever, right? So I think both the commercial space, which is our primary focus, and our residential space, because when we are working on somebody's business space, they like what we do and they ask us to do their homes. Those have completely changed. And there is a resistance to the human condition. I think you may agree with me. There's a resistance to change. So yes. we have this still, I can still feel it. It's pretty out there. Oh, we don't have to wear masks anymore. Oh, we can go out anymore now, and we can drive around as long as we can afford the gas in the cars, but we can drive now, right? And I want to go back to the normal that I know. There is no going back to that, nor should we actually, if you're smart and if you're a savvy business person in a service or product business, this is an opportunity to completely revamp the whole thing, to reinvent the whole thing. Blank piece of paper, you get to shape it the way you want it. And that is super exciting for me, right? That you could actually have that kind of a paradigm opportunity to change things. We do wellness. We do spas and wellness centers and medical spaces and stuff like that. I have noticed. I just finished an assisted living project in Stanton. It's 80,000 square feet, 122 bed, double occupancy. Right? You want to talk about the money that comes from that kind of project? I think the projected gross take is like $7 million a year. on that project, right? From double occupancy roommate situation for these seniors. So we've got an aging population, we've got assisted living, we've got wellness and spas, we've got nutrition and stuff like that. And what's happening, Rick, is there's a hybriding that's happening. Like a baby boomer incoming market isn't going to go to a senior center. They're not going to really want to be out of their home because they like the familiar environment. They're healthier in most cases. They're able to maybe sustain a more independent lifestyle. But the whole environment around us, the municipalities, the policies and stuff like that do not support that. And you're talking about a $71 million population or customer base. So we were heading in this direction. What COVID did is it accelerated the process, and it made it undeniable that you either were going to get on that train and leave the station, or it's going to leave you behind. And next thing you know, you're basically trying to get hold of a normal that it's not even the new normal. It's the next normal. And we should be taking that kind of proactive action in shaping it, to be honest.
So it sounds like to me that COVID for you personally and professionally has really kind of done a renewal of passion, because you get a whole chance to be creative in a way that the marketplace previously didn't even consider needed this kind of blended creativity that you're bringing to this conversation today.
It was harder to sell because it's not we tend to be a society that likes very clean, defined things that we can put in a neat little box and put on the shelf, right? Complex layering of even people and personalities and backgrounds kind of confuse us a little bit sometimes. And we tend to live in a community, in a society that wants to package it that way because it's easier to sell, right? I can make that as my end profile, and then I can basically target it with marketing dollars and stuff like that. When it becomes a complex situation, which we are in right now, like we don't know what the answers are. There's a certain amount of hesitance, confusion, because we don't know the answers. We also have been through this for long enough in a period of time over the last couple of years that it's no longer a passing thing. Oh, this is not just summer vacation that's going to go by, and I'll write about what impact it was back in the day. We've got generations right now that basically didn't get a graduation when they graduated high school. We got people that basically started high school with like the first few months basically, or first 6 months basically doing it remote, right? So those are acceptable realities for these kids now. If we project forward 20, 30 years, what is that expected reality and flexibility going to really mean in how it shapes our world? What are we going to gain? And at the same time, what are we going to lose? Are we going to lose that personal touch? You and I know that certain deals, regardless of what time or era it's going to be, it's going to come down to a face-to-face handshake or some people skills that are required to conduct that kind of connection. That's going to be a given, right? So when you have everything basically gearing towards remote and VR and AR and stuff like that, when as a tool, it's usable and it's great, and there's no one size fits all. But at the same time, what do we lose? So it's a very interesting time for us as a society, having been shaken to our core with this thing called COVID. When I did the presentation, I started off, I don't know if you saw the video, it was on a little boat in Newport Beach Harbor, right? Well, that wasn't the intention, Rick. The intention was to point to the buildings like I was telling you about from the top of the parking structure in Marina Village, right? And instead, here comes the rain, and I've got a camera guy, and what do I do? And you and I live in a digital world, so it's like, what do I do? So I went down to the electric boat company, hired a boat, got out in there, and until that point, honest truth, the subject was so vast, I didn't know how to tie it together for a 12-minute presentation. So a storm hit, and I started ad-libbing and saying things like, we survived the storm called COVID. Right. And the whole thing just linked together all the way down to the very end, which was a hilarious coincidence, where a rainbow shows up. And I'm talking about the gold at the end of that rainbow, should we choose to actually embrace the opportunity to reinvent and reimagine. It's very funny.
Yeah, that video is fantastic, and I think it's one of the qualities of successful entrepreneurs. You have to pivot. You gotta be flexible, and you certainly were in how you did that video. It turned out marvelously. That leads me to my next thought that I wanted to talk about with you.
Sure.
You've been using social media effectively for quite some time, Brad. And I'd like if you
very kind of you, sir. Thank you.
That's my opinion. I wonder if you could talk with me about the evolution of what you're doing and the interview shows that you've done, and just how you've seen this digital platform for helping your brand and your messaging and all that you're doing with it.
Sure. Well, I mean, any time that you get to basically amplify your own voice does two things. One, you get to script the messaging, right? So you controlling it. You're not dependent on somebody else getting it right or wrong. And if you're like me, I've had enough people try to write things up and get my background that's not very linear, confused and complicated. And my parents were born in a place that they weren't, and all that stuff, right? But so there's a positive to that. You control your messaging. You are able to do that. Now, it's not for everybody. It's sort of uncomfortable for some people to do that. It's sort of like public speaking, and it's a muscle. It's like the more you do it, the more you get comfortable with it. The other thing that's kind of really cool about being the person who basically does that is it gives you courage to actually be transparent, not necessarily personal, but personable. And it develops your ability to showcase what the differentiating factors about you is. Because, there's a ton of people that are, let's use design as an example, that are absolutely talented and worth every penny that you spend for their skills, right? So we're all in a competitive market. What is your unique value proposition? What is it that you bring to the table that may be of value to somebody? And, not everybody is a one size fits all. We are not the answer to everybody. So social media, and I'll just give you a little background. I've been online since 1994. I have the bills to show where I paid $1 a minute on AOL. Okay. When we were still using 44 modems, and then, oh my God, there was a higher modem now. We're in the space age now, right? So I've been online for a very long time. Part of that meant that I have a lot of people that I've been connected with that has grown organically over that period of time. Also, I happened to go to school overseas. I was born overseas. So for people that are sort of nomads, if you will, we were digital nomads before there was a term. You got your long distance cards, and you made calls on the phone, and then you start using technology to maintain a connection with family and stuff like that. Whether it was bulletin boards or then chat rooms on AOL or whatever. So it's been a very natural evolution for me. But at the same time, I also am in a visual field, so I know that digital content was going to need to go there. It was going to need to go video. If you remember, before COVID, how many people Zoomed? Mm-hmm. It was a thing that, it was kind of novelty. Somebody sent me a Zoom link. I'll see what this is, or whatever. It didn't work. I'm just going to call them or get on a conference call. Now there's so many people that are Zooming that we almost have a cacophony of content. Like, it's so much noise out there that's just digital noise, video, audio. And so now it's even more important to script your own messaging, to be sophisticated about it. And if everybody is Zooming after COVID, and you and I have been doing podcasts and shows like this for a long time, the quality of the output is going to be super critical, that you are now not just a 2.0 version of what you were doing before, but a 3.0 and a 5.0 version, right? And that doesn't mean you have to look like CNN or MSNBC or Fox. Like, it doesn't have to be that canned, right? Because I think candid is better than canned, right? And authentic is better than scripted. But you got to be comfortable in that space. And that means comfortable in yourself, comfortable in your material, honest and genuine. And if you you can hit that sweet spot, and you can do it in a manner that is the correct formula for your subject matter or area of focus. Because the other thing I also see with social media, and now you got TikTok on top of the technique. First it was just video, and then it was stories, and now it's TikTok, and then it's going to be like VR and AR using Oculus. I think everything has its place. I've had people approach me and say, you've been doing this show for 6 years. It's great. I don't know how to do this. I would like to do this, but my thoughts are, I'm going to do a finance show every week, and I'm going to talk about specifically an area of finance. It's going to be every week, and it's going to be this way. And I'm like, you might want to consider once every 3 weeks. Like, your content, to stretch it out more, maybe, unless you have something very specific, your formula may be once every 3 weeks. Somebody who maybe is doing current events or local news, you may want to do it every week. If somebody has a book and they're trying to basically put out their philosophy and their messaging of their book, I've done this. It's 12 chapters. That's not an open-ended podcast or a show. I don't even want to call them podcasts anymore. Show, right? that is a series. That's almost like a made-for-TV movie kind of thing. It's a series of 12 episodes, right? And then maybe you spin it in a different way. So digital content is and social media is an amazing tool. But you got to still be, your true sense of who you are, your core still has to come through. Otherwise, you just get lost in a whole sea of noise.
And there is a lot of noise out there, and you have definitely cut through that here on the show today. I'm wondering if someone would like to learn more about you, Rad, or your firm, where would you direct them to go online?
Well, I said this to you when we were preparing for the show. I said, I think I'm infamous and overexposed. So, but I think I'm in good company. So, the business, the Raad Ghantous Associates business, is under raadghantous.com, and it's spelled RAADGHANTOUS.com. We're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram. The website is being revamped, so there's one there, but there's be a new website coming up. Again, we're reinventing like everybody else. Like it's got to be relevant to now. The Rad Life is the name of the show that I did for about 6 years, and I've taken a little bit of a hiatus, but the plans are to bring it back in like a 3.0 kind of version. Which will be remote, as we have the ability now to do the remote 3-camera setups as well as in studio. And we've got a couple of studios that we're using with, and the post-production level will be sort of, like national network kind of post-production level, because I think it's not only important, but it's also what people deserve to receive as far as quality content. I also, because like I was mentioning, people had asked me to help them with some stuff. We set up a company called Golden Seal Productions. And when people go look at that, the logo is a bear versus a seal. So it doesn't have anything to do with the marine animal life. It has to do with the golden seal of approval for those old school consumer people, right? So it's goldensealproductions.com. And we are open because I really believe everybody has something to contribute. And if we can help people amplify their voice in a way that is beneficial to everybody, we live in a society where a community, I think that's a valuable thing. So you can find out more about that at goldensealproductions.com. Some of the stuff in the works. I'm launching a new show where I'm going to co-host called Being Gen X, because I'm a Gen Xer, and I feel that the baby boomers got a lot of exposure, rightfully so, and the millennials are getting a lot of exposure, but we bridge generation of 64 million. We didn't hit the 70 million mark, right? Kind of got lost in the shuffle. And I found it very funny when I went on Wikipedia that the Gen Xers are basically known as the slacker generation. And I'm like, I don't know one Gen Xer that's a slacker. So I feel like I need to represent my generation and actually do it through something that I'm comfortable with. And it'll be fun. We'll highlight certain people that are in that generation. I think we are a bridge generation. I think we really are a bridge generation. We got 1 foot in analog and 1 foot in digital, and I think it could be an interesting thing, and it keeps me, kind of driven, Rick. It's like it's creative. It's just sitting and visiting with people. You know how it is when we do these things. There's a sort of a joy from the doing, and I think as a society we have lost the art of conversation. We sit down if there's an agenda, if there's a to-do list. I think what they say in the South, we visit. See people sit down. Oh, we visited. I think the art of visiting is something. Art of conversation is something that we have really negatively impacted and we've lost. And unfortunately, when you look at current events and how political parties talk to one another and how even neighbors talk to one another, the fact that we have not really made this something to champion and to improve, we have suffered for as a society.
I agree. Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed you being on the program. We have a relationship that goes back years, and it's always wonderful to bring people that I know and cherish onto the program. So thanks for giving of your time and being a part of our community. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you too, Rick. Keep doing what you're doing. I love it. So, and when the show comes back, you got an open invitation.
Thank you. I'll take you up on that. I'd like to thank the audience too for being part of Orange County's longest running business talk show. This was episode number 1352. If you, like Rad, are an Orange County entrepreneur and you'd like to tell your story, then let's connect on LinkedIn. I'm Rick Franzi, RICFRANZI, or visit my website, rickfranzi.com. and we'll see if we can't schedule you for some point in the future. And until the next time we have a chance to be together, I hope all of your business decisions will move your company in a positive direction.